Welcome to the Bedroom Studios podcast, the podcast where we talk about what goes on behind the scenes in a musician's world and bridge the industry gap by bringing their stories, expertise, and advice to early career artists. Subscribe to join us for a fun chat about life as a creative person, tips and tricks for pursuing an artistic career, navigating the music industry, and more. My name is Della Rossa. I'm a singer-songwriter based in Toronto, and today I will be interviewing Jaye Marsh. Jaye Marsh, also known as the Wild Flute, is a Canadian flutist and leader of the Flute in the Wild project that takes people into Canada's wild spaces through a flute lens. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Emma. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on because I am also a flute player, so Yay. I feel a strong connection. I love what you're doing in your creative practice, bringing in different genres into your flute playing and also connecting with a lot of different composers and doing a lot of place-based composing and performance work. So I'm excited to jump into that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
So to start off, can you introduce yourself to our audience and give a bit of background on your music and artistic journey?
Sure. So I'm Jaye the Wild Flute, and I am an experimental flutist, and I'm on a mission to add to the Canadian contemporary flute music repertoire and to amplify Canadian art music as a distinct cultural resource. And my passion is showing people how to use creativity as a foundation for their lives and helping them access their creative spark. So what that means is I encourage everybody to follow their dreams. They're never too old. They're never too young. And you can use creativity in every area of your life. And that is, that's a huge thing for me. Visual arts, sort of like a creative cross-training is sort of a term that I'm seeing a number of people use. And I really like that one. It's, one creative outlet can fuel another. And if you're experiencing some kind of creative block in one art form, you can actually free that creative process up by using another art form.
Really cool. Do you find that creativity connects to excitement? The reason I ask is because we can fall into a lot of ruts. Do you find that creativity helps with that?
Absolutely. I think creativity helps you access your entire emotional sphere, not just excitement, but sadness and joy. Much like music reflects and can soothe us in any of our emotional states. I think that's true for any creative output. It's part of our human inheritance and our right to create and experience, and those things I think are intrinsically linked.
Really cool. It reminds me of this video on recess therapy where this guy interviews a bunch of little kids.
Yes.
He asks this kid, is happiness an important emotion? Or a question like that. And the kid's like, no. And they're like, why? Because all the emotions are important.
Exactly. I think I remember seeing those interviews.
They're adorable. So how does your, philosophy around creativity show up in your practice as a musician and as a flutist?
I think I've always, interestingly enough, kind of kept it separate. I was on an orchestral track for so long, and there's creativity in knowing how to, perform a line and doing recitals and playing things, but I never really got into writing my own music or doing my own thing on flute because the way I chose to be trained, I guess you can say, was very exacting. Things are done a certain way. There's a certain level of perfection we're going for, especially for the audition treadmill and the performance requirements. I think I walled some of that creativity off. But I'm also a visual artist. I'm a graphic designer, and I do creativity in the rest of my life. And you can tell by my background, creativity is a whole thing for me. And so it wasn't really until I did my debut recording that I started really integrating all of the creativity and the visual arts and all these things that are important to me in synthesizing it. That's when I started really bringing it all together. And that process then unlocked my own musical creativity. And I started writing songs, and now I'm composing a piece for my next album. I'm improvising a lot more, which I was afraid to do before. And so it's really been recent that I've come to this realization, and being able to bring all of it together is bringing me joy. And that mission statement I read was sort of a recent bringing together of these things.
Yeah, it's really interesting how different types of training or different structures of training kind of focus on different things, and in some of them, that kind of intuitive music making can be not focused on a lot. Yeah, I found that for me, I experience music intuitively and I make music intuitively. So like I was able to still access that and when I was doing my classical training, but it can be like a kind of a difficult thing to try to incorporate when like I didn't have a lot of opportunities to improvise, for example, in my classical training.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I experienced that too. I did get to do that a little bit because I always said yes to some of the contemporary groups, and then when I was at U of T, Nexus was there, and so they invited instrumentalists to come in, and they were always pushing everybody's envelope, and so I got a taste of that a little bit, and I was still a little reticent. I remember when I was really young, I felt free in like writing a piece, but when I was going through school, it was a very different time. And there was the orchestral stream, and then there's the soloist and a teacher. And there wasn't a lot of blurred lines. And so I know a number of people were just radicals in their own time, and they went and broke those things down, but that's not where my brain went. And I really loved the orchestral playing. So I kind of boxed myself in a way, but I wanted to master that piece first and get to a place where I could really trust myself as a musician. And I think that trust piece came at the same time that all of these other creative avenues came together. So this was when I was able to access it.
So was that kind of the spark that led you to start integrating more, I guess, like creativity and like all of those things you were talking about? Was it that learning how to trust yourself?
I think it was actually trying to figure out how to do the recording piece and being encouraged to believe in myself enough that I could actually do a recording, because I was even struggling with that self-belief. So I had started, getting calls for work around Ontario, and so that bolstered my confidence certainly. And so adding the recording piece, and then it was just during the research of my recording, I started to meet people in other genres, and then I tripped on other flutists who are doing electronic things, and then violinists, and it just sort of, just by going down that path, my searches took me to these places and encouraged me. I remember in high school, and we didn't have any electronics, I mean, back in the Jurassic, but we didn't have like easy access like we do now to microphones and information on how to set it all up, guitar pedals, that kind of thing, how to hook up an acoustic instrument to that sort of thing. Those things, but I really wanted to. I remember wanting to back then, and then it just sort of got lost in my focus on the traditional classical path. But now that's come back, and so I have a looper and effects pedals that I'm really playing. So it's that playful piece that's not traditionally in the classical genre that's allowing me to be a little bit more playful, and then I'm bringing that back into my classical practice.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm finding that for so many people, that self-belief is like kind of once you find that, or not even find it, because I don't know if we ever find it, but once we're kind of on that journey of like moving towards things that reaffirm our self-belief, then things start to fall into place, because the things that reaffirm our self-belief are usually the things that we're meant to be doing.
Exactly. I think, I mean, I always believed in myself because I always took on big projects, and I decided to go to university despite people telling me I should do other things. And so that's always been there. My parents have tons of stories of me being quite independent, giving them mild heart attacks on the daily. So that was always there, but I think it was just not focused in a particular way until now.
Gotcha. I would love to talk about some of your projects. Can we
Okay.
talk about your first album?
Yes, I would love to. Do you have any questions, or what can I share with you?
Maybe can you share just kind of the overall concept, what you did and what led you to start this project? And then we can go into how you actually made it happen.
Sure thing. So the Flute in the Wild project is a commissioning and recording project. It's kind of a multifaceted project that is centered around adding to the flute repertoire by Canadian composers. And I've asked my composers to write about their favorite Canadian wild space. So bringing together my desire to add to the flute repertoire for me and my colleagues, amplifying Canadian art voices, and promoting Canadian composing, and also my environmental side with amplifying and highlighting beautiful Canadian wild spaces that may or may not be at risk, but that's part and parcel of our existence on the planet.
That is so cool.
The first album was composers that I knew, because I had to cobble together a bunch of Canadian composers in order to be on the Center Discs label. So that's through the Canadian Music Centre. They all had to be Canadian composers. So I started with Elizabeth Rom, and she's an oboist as well as a composer. And then I had my friend Richard Maskell, who wrote me a piece together with John Rice, an elder in the Wissahickon First Nation.
Wow.
So they did a story with me there. And then another friend of mine gave me a piece about his hometown in Newfoundland, a beautiful little town there. And one of the pieces that was not written for me, but was kind of a linchpin piece that I had performed. I think I did the Toronto premiere of it for flute and pre-recorded loon calls. Oh. And it was written by Diane Barry. It's called Calling. And she wrote it for her. Right. So she good. Thank you. I love that piece. And she wrote it for her mom, who grew up in Georgian Bay. And that's where my family has a cottage. So that's how the whole nature thing kind of swirled together, as all these bits and pieces. I needed a theme to write my grant and to really connect the whole album together. And so I asked them to write about their favorite wild space, because I recorded the demo in my favorite wild space, which is in Georgian Bay. And so that's how that all came together. And so with in addition to that, I wanted to incorporate other creative aspects. So for each track, I got a video artist to create a music video, like an art video to the music, and I gave them free rein to express how the music felt to them, using certain themes. And like we went back and forth, but it was really under their direction with some push and pull from me. But I wanted every piece of the project to allow each person to explore their creativity. The person who made my outfit that I was photographed in, the cover designer of the album, like I said, the tracks, the videos that I projected onto us for our premieres, all of these pieces I gave free rein to the artists themselves to bring their artistry. So it was really a collaborative project, and that's my focus.
That's amazing. I think a lot of times when we're starting out, and it can be difficult to find collaborators or to build connections like that, or even to trust other people with our ideas that we're so passionate about. A lot of times we end up doing a lot on our own out of necessity. And I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit more about that collaborative process, and and like what went really well, what was challenging, and that's the end of my question.
I totally went through that because I do have a lot of skills. I had anticipated that I would actually design the album myself because I'm a graphic designer and I have designed other people's albums, and I do a lot of that kind of stuff. And I wanted to paint some things, and I even have taught myself a little bit of like video editing. So I do some of my own, the social posts and all that sort of thing. Yeah. I do all that, and I had the capacity, but then I had the capability, but the capacity actually was missing. I just simply didn't have enough time to do all of that. And then just as I was sort of processing all of that and processing because I got a couple of grants for this, and the whole point of the grant system is to invigorate all of the arts and to hire within the arts. So it's not for me to get all the money myself, but really to hire people to do what they do best and to really try and participate in a healthy, broad arts community in Canada. So as I was going through this whole, it's too much for me to handle. I had a budget to hire people and to do it properly. And so that's where I started to think, well, I really, like my parents are visual artists as well. And so I have a strong connection to visual art through them. And so I wanted to honor that because I realized how much of that I had in me. So that's when I first reached out to Michael Rycraft to do the cover design. He was a Juno winner. He'd never done a classical music CD before. So there was I wanted to explore, what do other genres look like when they hear me? Like what do they do in response to the music that I know and love? I want to experience how other people see it. So then it just sort of went from there. Some of the challenges I had were letting go of my own vision and my ego for what I wanted it to look like. But really, you have to trust people who really do know what they're doing. And we came up with some really interesting things. And one of the videos, the initial reaction that the composer had to the official video with his track, he didn't get it. He really didn't like it. and that was okay for him to not like it. I thought it was really cool. And it was really sort of avant-garde and had some really sort of odd elements to it. But then while I was watching the video before I'd released it, a poem came to my mind. And it was completely not part of the story necessarily, but I actually wrote some poetry, and I shared that with the composer, and he said that has to go in the imprint whenever the music gets sold. That has to be done. And so I now read that poem out anytime I go to play that piece. So the arts kind of ping-ponged around each other, and it was really, really affirmed my mission to connect all of the arts and to really be open creatively, because that's where magic happens, right? Magic happens when you let other people in. And I have to say, there's a Star Wars connection to this. Is that weird?
No.
So I was young when the first 3 Star Wars came out, and they were really amazing and also grassroots, and they had to really cobble together with like potatoes and duct tape to try and make all the special effects work. And then when they re-released them, George Lucas had free reign because he had the computers and he got to control everything. And personal opinion, the prequels that were all under his control were not nearly as magical because it was only one person's vision. And I've worked in film as well, and you really do need to have a collaborative atmosphere where the actors bring their magic, the set designs bring their magic, the music brings their magic. And I mean, that was the one thing that George Lucas did right, was get the music in there. Mm-hmm. But really, and that made a mark on me. It's just like, like when it was just one person's vision, it wasn't as good. And so that stayed with me, and that also informed my process.
Yeah, like what you were talking about, how the kind of organic, like the inspiration comes so organically, and ping ponging, like you said, when there's more than one person working on something. Like if one person's feeling blocked and you're the only person working on it, then the whole project stops for the length of time that you're feeling blocked. But then if there's multiple people on it, it's very unlikely that every single person working on it is going to lose their steam all at the same time. So it just keeps the momentum going, and it keeps the excitement going for the project.
For sure. And what I realize is that I am still steering the ship. It's still my vision, and I need to hold on to the fact that that is my vision. I'm the driver behind all of it. So that's the other part that can be kind of challenging, is that really all of the ideas live in my head. And as much as I'm allowing other people to come in, I still need to keep it going in the right direction. And so I'm kind of like still the front man for the project, right? So yeah. There's that element too, but it's fun.
Yeah. And you are currently beginning the process for the second volume of Flute in the Wild.
I am.
So how is this project different from the first one?
Okay, so this second one, I had to go find new composers, and I wanted to, given that Canada is so big, I will have fodder for the rest of my natural life of areas to get compositions for and to express and to put into music. So because my first album got a lot of play in Calgary, I have some family in Calgary, and I just happened to be meeting a number of people out there. And one composer reached out to me very shortly after the first album, said, "I would like to write you a piece." And he's from Edmonton, Alberta. That's Joseph Bly. And I thought, okay, I will keep that in mind, because there's all different areas. And so when I started the journey of, again, writing out the grant proposals and thinking of the ideas, I decided to focus on Western Canada. So Calgary and Alberta and BC. And so I put out a call for composers, but I didn't have, other than that one composer who reached out to me, I didn't have any friends who were composers out there. I reached out to a couple of people, and some people said they were available. And so I went through a number of people who were interested, who were available, who had time. I reached out to some people. And so it took a while to cobble that together, but these are all people new to me. So they're not friends that I've known for a while. So that's different. And so there are people. It's interesting to get a perspective on how these composers feel about my project, given that they've only discovered or gotten to know me through the project. And so that's a different dynamic, and I'm really enjoying hearing other people's perspectives on what they see my project doing. And I can feel it starting to grow on its own organically, and that's kind of an exciting feeling. So I've met some new composers. I'm very excited. We have one piece in. I was given permission by Sean Clark to do the electronically enhanced version of his mountain hymnal, and he got a grant to do the sort of acoustic natural reverb version of his piece on his recording. So he's given me permission to do the electronic version, and he's going to release the other one. So that's really exciting, but he's also writing me a whole new piece. So I'm excited about that. And so that's been kind of fun. So I have those pieces in, and I'm writing my own piece, but I'm still waiting to get all the other new pieces back. They're due this month. I did send them an email, and I'm waiting, because then I have to start working on them and then get them ready for performance. So that's something that in the classical world we don't really do. Normally we play something and put it on stage over and over again, and then when you've perfected it, you then record it. I'm kind of doing it the opposite way, because part of what I'm doing this for is not for me to be the be all, like the last word in these pieces. I'm the first word, and I make all of the scores available for anybody to play. And I actually want part of the origin story of this project is amplifying Canadian composers, because people don't even know that they're here outside of Canada, some of them. And so, especially in the flute world. And so I've been on a journey of promoting these pieces and Canadian compositions for flute in the flute world in general. And in fact, Bridal Veil Falls by Elizabeth Rom was performed last month by the musicians of the Pittsburgh Symphony.
Very cool.
Right? And so that means our Canadian music is getting played by other people. And that's really what I'm doing this for. So my recording is not the last word and the ultimate. It's just the beginning. So I want other people to play it too.
That's such an important point, even for like myself, who's right. I mean, I am a flutist, but now I primarily just do pop music. And over this past year, I've had so much stress about recording my voice for songs that I'm going to release, because at some point, the thing I record is going to be the thing that ends up on the recording. And in my head, I feel like if it's going to be the final version, it has to be perfect. It has to be really good. And I don't know if it's ever going to be really good. And it's like, you kind of build it up in your head so much. But even if you make the most fantastic vocal take you've ever done in your life that ends up on the recording, you don't stop there. You continue developing, and it's not going to be the last time you ever sing that song. And so I'm trying to view it as more of a process that doesn't end once you've recorded it.
I will share something with you that my producer told me, because I was having similar kind of crisis of, oh my God, it's not perfect. And he said, this is just a snapshot, and it's going to be better when you start, when you play it live, and when you play it again, this is merely a snapshot, and maybe you'll record it again. It's just a moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is the part of the interview where I take a second to think about what to say next.
Have I finished with the second one? So I'm still trying to get to Calgary. So can I keep talking about my second project?
Yeah, you're doing a crowdfunding right now, right? And you reached a major milestone recently.
I did. So I did a crowdfunding, and the official crowdfunding deadline has ended in March, but I've got some extended timelines, because the first goal was to get enough to pay for the recording part, right? Studio time and engineer time. But I would love to actually record these pieces about Western Canada in Western Canada, because I've never been west of Winnipeg. So Canada has a beautiful museum of music called the National Music Centre in Calgary, and they've got fantastic soundboards and beautiful rooms and historic pianos and historic spaces and all kinds of amazing resources for musicians, and a whole history of our stuff there, plus a performance space. And I would really like to record out there, and also experience in the process, go see some of these areas if I can, that my composers are writing about. So I'm still looking for some help to do that. So that's what my next goal is.
Yeah, you'll get there. Yeah, it's gonna happen. If it's okay with you, I wanted to ask you more about some of the other things you do in your flute playing, specifically about how you're exploring electronic music and effects and pedals with your flute playing.
Sure, I'd love to. It's and when people say you have to niche down or like pick a lane and just do that, it's like I can't. I get so many different ideas, and I am stretched a little bit thin trying to describe all these things. But one of the first things I did when I sort of a moment. It was like one of those, I woke up at 3 a.m. with an idea, right? I came back from Chicago when I did an international debut of parts of the album at the National Flute Association convention. It was the first one after COVID. Their 50th anniversary, they invited me down to perform. And it was while I was on that trip, I had the idea, I would love to do something with flute and percussion, and my percussionist was there with me, and he really liked the idea, and it was he that encouraged me to do some experimenting and improvisation, because he's an excellent improviser. Most percussionists are. They're just amazing individuals. And so I started doing some of that. And then I woke up like maybe the next day after I got home, and I had a fully formed song and development and an idea in my head. And that's where the name Aphrodite Unbound came from. I have a song of that name. I'm not ready to release it yet. I still have to tweak it. But then I wrote 3 other songs, and I created a sound healing event where we could actually perform my new songs. And so then that just started that whole wave of getting some lyrics down. I'm not really singing. I do more spoken word, only because I'm not a trained singer yet. I'm working on getting at least some of my voice there. But I have lyrics, and I have musical ideas, and those were just starting to come. And I had gotten a looper, because with a single line instrument, it's hard to get enough dimensions to make it interesting. And so I started using my TJ Flute's copper alto, which is such a beautiful instrument, and I put down some pads, and then I improvise over that. And so through the process of helping myself learn to improvise, I created these soundscapes, and I really enjoyed that process. And so and the pedal I got has also effects on it, so I'm starting to play around with some of those things, delay and effects, and it's been just such a fun toy box. And there's a number of instrumentalists who have some resources out there for us, and I got all of those, and I got some time in with some pretty amazing instrumentalists who experiment as well, and mostly in the jazz world and rock world. And so I'm taking all of that into a soundscape, ethereal sort of space, neoclassical space. And so that's the Aphrodite Unbound group. And we just did another performance. I had to find a new percussionist, because the first one just got so busy, because he's very popular as a drummer. So I have a new person, and we just did another concert with those same pieces, and we're now developing new tracks, and we'll be releasing those. But for the second album about Western Canada, I was challenged to write my own piece. And I thought, I know that there must be other flutists out there who would love to try out, have a little map of something that's still classical in their vein, but then they get to play with some of these tools and some of these enhancements. And so that's the structure of my piece. I'm going to score it all out, and I'm going to write out all the parameters, so it's fairly easy for people to add in just a couple of things so that they can use whatever pedal they have. I'm laying it all out very simply. So they don't have to get the same pedal I have, so that people can experiment with that too in a fun way. So yeah.
That's so exciting. Can you describe your tech setup from in a very practical way? Because I find sometimes it's like a barrier for people when they're wanting to do it, but they have no idea how to set it up from the beginning.
Yes, it was such a huge barrier for me too, honestly. So I totally feel for people, and I'm going to include that kind of description and all of that stories in my edition of the piece. But there's a flutist in the States called Melissa Keeling, and she actually wrote a book called The Electric Flute, because she was pioneering this stuff a long time ago. She also was one of the first people to use that sliding head joint, because she was I know
which one you're talking about.
Yes, and so she was one of the pioneers that worked with Robert Dick on developing that. And so she wrote a book, and when I saw that she'd written that book and released it, she also has on her website some samples of what flutes sound like through different effects. And her resource is invaluable as a bridge from classical to, this new experimental stuff. And so she's fantastic. And I actually hired her to mentor me for a little while. And so, I went down that hole, because I had some anxiety around, all these cables and microphones and all that kind of stuff. So Initially, what I did is I went to Long and McQuaid and I rented equipment because we have that capability in Toronto. I'm sure there's got to be rental places everywhere. And I just rented cables. I talked to the guitar section. That's where you rent your pedals from and whatever. And I told them what I wanted to do. They thought, hey, that's really cool. Never heard about somebody doing that. And they set me up. And then I learned about microphones. And there's a Toronto flutist who is absolutely amazing. And T Fung, she's in the jazz and rock and pop space. And she's a flutist and she can shred guitar solos on her flute, and she's an amazing human, and she was another person that I tagged to help guide me through some of this. And so she's another person that I use as inspiration, and she helped me talk through the microphone setups and whatever. So what I have now is an RC600, Boss RC600 by Roland Instruments, and I have a DPA headset mic. The reason I went for a headset mic is because I wanted to be able to talk to people and switch instruments quickly. And eventually, I'm still tethered. I still have a cable attachment from my from my microphone to my setup. So eventually, I want to be wireless so that I can move around and feel free. And so a lot of people will just put on a contact mic or some other kind of microphone and attach it to their flute, or they'll and so DPA makes all those kinds of things. But I went for the DPA mic, which is very expensive, because as flutists, we're all about our sound. Right? Mm-hmm. We spend so much time on the sound. Now, jazz flutists don't have the same obsession with super clear sound and orchestral sound, and that's the sound I really enjoy in my playing. I will make other sounds. I'll do, like, I'm not at the beatboxing point yet, but I don't mind changing sounds and like really making ugly sounds and all that kind of thing. But just there's a purity of the sound that I really like, that I would like to be able to achieve. So for me, the microphone is the most important part. And then, so I'm able to plug that in. And I got another piece of kit that I found super useful called a Voco Loco. It's made in Canada, oddly enough. And you can it was made by, I think, a brass player, but also an acoustic instrumentalist who wanted to be able to control what sound went out to either the soundboard or to their other pedals, that kind of thing, because you can really, and it also has an internal loop where you can have the pedals go through and you control the output and the input. But there's also, super important, a mute button. So because I'm playing, a flute, I don't have a hand free. I can't just, tap things like, guitarists can, sometimes, have a free hand or whatever. We're all on our feet. And so that's why I tend to do pedals rather than computers and buttons and that kind of thing. And this one has a pedal mute button in case there's any feedback, which happens when you have an open microphone on stage and there's a lot of other equipment. So whereas when you go through pedals, normally you have to you get a line in from a guitar, and so it's really clean. There's no interference. But with an open mic, it can cause a lot of feedback, and you'll hear the loop inside the loop, and it starts doing really wild things, which can be fun creatively, but often will start creating a bit of a mess. And so that mute button is super helpful, and I just wanted to be able to just shut off and also mute while I change pages or talk to somebody. And it's just easier to have it right there at my feet. And then that goes into the RC600, and that has multiple loop channels and effects I can play with. But I actually did a gig recently where I just took the Voco Loco and plugged into the sound system, and I didn't use any effects, but I was able to play along, and it worked perfectly. The sound guy was able to blend me with this other, with the singer pianist who also does some rave stuff. It was very loud. My ears are still ringing, but there's evidence of it. And that was super fun to be able to play with other bands and other genres and whatnot. So that rig is my main rig, is the microphone and the Voco Loco into whatever speaker system. And then I am renting a single speaker that I can take with me and play outdoor gigs, and I have it all in a little rolling cart, and that and I've got lots of extra cables.
Yeah, the rolling cart is a game changer because those amps are heavy.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I still remember back when I was living downtown, I would go to Long McQuaid and rent a PA, small PA, and then I would go busking, but I would have to carry it down the streets to wherever I was going, and it was so heavy.
Yeah, they get heavy, and I have a really light one. Like they're getting lighter and lighter, bless them. And they have more now that have built-in reverb and delay. If you're just doing that, if you're like a guitarist, that you can. It's so light, and they come with wheels on them now because they understand our plight.
All musicians, we have all of these neck and shoulder issues.
I know. And what's really challenging is that I'm not used to having to hump all this gear. I normally just throw my flute in my bag and then I go, right? So it's just all this extra gear. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Don't say that to a tuba player. They'll be like, yeah, this is my whole life.
I feel for you.
Yeah. We have sympathy, but not empathy because we can't relate.
No.
So we're reaching the towards the end of the interview, but before we get to the last couple of questions, I want to ask you about how you're approaching music business and branding and marketing and taking inspirations from other genres and practices and using it towards your flute playing.
Absolutely. So until I recorded an album, I was pretty non-existent. I was just a partaker. I was a audience member on social media, and I didn't know how to promote albums, or it wasn't even in my wheelhouse. So I thought, well, I have to figure out how to do this. I had hoped that the Center Disc label would be able to help me, and they certainly took care of the distribution piece and talking to PR. But so I hired a PR person to get some articles in, just so that I could get some kind of groundwork on what was happening. And I hired a company to just do some initial Instagram posting so I could see what they were doing and learn from them, because I didn't have time. I was doing a release plan and I was doing a bunch of other stuff. So I just needed them to get me from, I had like 400 followers.
And look at you now.
I know, almost like it's crazy. And so, but I learned from them and I took some master classes. I joined a Brandman network with Sean and paid for that. And it was mostly hip hop folks, and they really know how to market and brand themselves. And so I spent a lot of time talking to them and finding out and learning what they were doing. And it was just through that process that I started to feel more comfortable getting into these like other creative avenues, because I was watching the rock and pop world be so creative and have so much fun. I wanted in on it. And then I found Rick Barker and Matt Bacon and a bunch of people who offer really smart music business, and I bought a bunch of books, including Ari Hershtan's. Ari's he runs a book, a podcast called Ari's Take, and it's all about the music business. And so I've just been, gathering those resources, and from that I sort of employed the branding piece. And it's funny, I actually, my hair went pink over COVID, and it was partially a brand thing, just to try and find a new persona in order to kind of put myself out there. But I also I'm naturally a redhead, and it just was starting to go dull. And it's like, oh, redheads cannot do dull hair. We just don't do that. So I went pink. So that became part of my branding experience. And so I'm leveraging that and leveraging my graphic design acumen, and just, learning from people and just starting to really organically reach out to people and make a network, really networking online and networking in person with people like you. And it's delighting my world to really connect with people. And that's how I'm doing it.
Well, I mean, the branding really worked because I followed you on Instagram before I met you in real life, because I saw that you were a Toronto-based flute player through some kind of mutual friends that we have. And I remember the first time I saw you in person, it was at a U of T masterclass. All of the flute players in Toronto were watching that in person.
Yes, we do that, yes.
Yeah, we congregate for the master classes. But I was watching it, and I saw your pink hair, and I didn't even know your name at the time, but I'm just like, oh, that's the Wild Flute.
Yay, it's working. Yeah. I'm so pleased.
Yeah.
That's good to know because we often, especially in social media, we're shouting into a void and we don't often respond back, especially in the classical world. People don't really like and respond, and they don't do the things that other musical genres do in terms of fan interaction or like colleague interaction, because everybody's so busy, or they're not into it, and that's fine. But then I'll go to a gig and people go, "Oh, I see your thing, or you're doing this, I saw that." It's like, okay, awesome, it's getting out there, so that's nice feedback. But it feels like crickets when you don't see people respond. So it's important to do both real life and social media.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's like sometimes I could just feel like we're just stuck on our phone all the time, but then when we actually go out in the world, it feels so much more real, and we need that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have 2 more questions before the end. The first one is, what piece of advice would you give to an emerging artist or musician or flute player beginning their career?
If somebody says you can't, don't believe them. And especially if it's yourself.
That is really good advice. And the last question is, what music recommendation would you like to share with our audience?
Well, I would love people to listen to my album, but not because I want them to hear me, but because I want them to hear my story and be inspired to do their own creative dream.
It's a really good album.
Thank you.
If you're listening, you should go listen to it right now.
Thank you so much.
It's the end of the episode, so you can listen to it right now. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Bedroom Studios podcast. Don't forget to add this podcast to your playlists and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify at Bedroom Studios Podcast. You can follow Jaye on social media and check out her music. All links can be found in the episode description. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.